Hi, everyone. Today we have Spencer Doman, the CEO of Doman Institute, as our guest, and we will talk today about special techniques and methodologies that he utilizes in his center, helping thousands of kids worldwide to help with the neurodiverse kids, helping with their development, with their well-being. So, Spencer, we welcome you on our podcast. We would like to learn a little bit more about you. What do you do with the company? Tiny bit about your history, because I know you're continuing the beginnings of your grandfather. I would like to learn a little bit about that. Tell us about your institute and about yourself first.
Yeah, sure. I have to kind of go back to my childhood a bit and talk about my experience growing up. I grew up in a very unique family and environment. My grandfather, Glenn Doman, pioneered a field of study called child brain development. He literally spent his life studying how a child's brain develops in the first years of life. And he was very interested in programs that could help speed brain development. How could we help children learn to read at a young age and become physically superb and do math, do mental math at a young age, and for children to succeed socially. And so he was very interested in development and most especially brain development. And so I grew up on the grounds of his institute's campus, and I spent a lot of my childhood actually spending time with children with special needs, as you said, children who are neurodiverse, who were coming to his clinic. And I would spend time with them and play with them in the waiting room between different sessions with my grandfather and his staff. And so that was really special because I got to watch these children with sometimes very severe developmental delays. Some of them were completely unable to walk or talk. I got to watch many of them achieve major milestones in front of my very eyes, learn to talk for the first time, learn to walk, go on to succeed in school. And so that was a very amazing experience to have as a kid. And it taught me a lot about human potential. But my grandfather, in working with children who were neurodiverse, he also discovered that many of the same activities and techniques he was implementing with those children were actually helpful for all kids, right? If he had discovered activities that were good for brain development for children with neurodevelopmental issues, well, those same things could be applied with neurotypical, well, healthy children and help them reach whole new heights in terms of their development. I was actually raised on his program by my own parents, Douglas and Rosalind. They implemented the Doman early reading program, early math program, the physical programs. So I really had this amazing experience. I grew up around neurodiverse kids who were being helped by the program. I was raised on the program myself. And there were many other children, neurotypical well children, who were raised on our programs. And I got to watch them go on to do exceptional things as well. So that's really how it all began. And honestly, when I was in college and deciding what I wanted to do with my life, I said, I love what I've been witnessing my whole life. And so I made the decision to continue on my family's work.
Absolutely, and it's a fascinating story. I always love seeing this father son continuation of the effort, because you probably saw how it was developed. You saw the learning curve. You saw the impact. You probably saw those kids that your father was able to help. That's incredible. So tell me, what's so special about your particular approach? How are you guys different? What are the big discoveries you made, and what exactly is your program?
Yeah, well, listen, there are a lot of things that I could address there, but I think if I had to kind of boil it down to two really important things. The first is that we are a brain focused approach, right? The brain is the command center of the body. Everything we do, from our ability to understand, to read, to speak, to run marathons, right, is because our brains allow us to do those things. And so this early focus on brain development, especially with young children when brains are at their most plastic state, right? There's a term neuroplasticity, which means the brain's ability to change when it's provided with stimulation and also opportunity, right? So, in many ways, if we had to really simplify it, the Doman method is very much about intellectual stimulation at a young age. And then also, how do we give children physical opportunity? And having seen the work that Brainrich Kids is doing, a lot of it is about giving kids physical opportunity. That's a major part of the Doman method. So the first important thing is it's a brain focused approach. The second thing is that parents are the most important people in the life of their children. And so what we do is we actually coach and educate parents as to what they can do about their children's brain development, right? It's kind of like that age old discussion, what's more important, nature or nurture, And we're really focused on the nurture side of things because we know how powerful that is. So when you combine the knowledge and experience that we have of the brain with a parent's commitment to the child and implementing those techniques, those activities, we really see children reach new heights that very often parents don't even know is possible. Children speaking many languages, playing the violin, 6-year-olds reading Shakespeare. And I know for some people that sounds crazy, but those are not just things that I've seen before, but were commonplace with the children that I was growing up with who were being raised on the program.
And would I be correct to say that you have three major focus areas? Let's say if I put the Venn diagram, you have nutrition, you have the physical development, and you have the oxygenation program.
Oxygenation.
If I put the Venn diagram in terms of the impact, in terms of you have a kid come to you and things like that, what are the first steps? What are the first activities that you guys do? What can create the most amount of impact? Actually, maybe walk me through the whole process. So somebody comes in, you do some sort of analysis, I would assume, right? And what are those first easy, low hanging fruit that you can suggest for parents to do?
Well, first of all, I would add a fourth thing to the thing you mentioned. So you talked about the Doman method oxygenation, you talked about physical development, you talked about nutrition. The fourth is intellectual stimulation. And it's really those four things together that provide a neurodiverse child with the best support necessary for their brain development. And just for clarity, I would like to say that when we say neurodiverse, we're talking about children with any kind of, neurodevelopmental condition or diagnosis. So autism, ADD, cerebral palsy, dyslexia, developmental delay, speech delay. There are so many. But yeah, what we do with the families when they come in, Yegor, is they come to our clinic here in Philadelphia. We have other international locations. And we start by evaluating the child and we see where is that child in their development? Where are they intellectually? Where are they physically? How are they in their health? So we really do a full assessment of where they are in their development. And then we customize a treatment program for the child, right? So we say, okay, for this specific child, here are the physical activities they need to learn how to run and skip and jump like other kids. Here are the intellectual activities they need to learn to do reading and math. Here's the nutrition program to keep them healthy and strengthen their immune system, right? So we customize a treatment program for that child. All of it is focused on neuroplasticity, and then the parents go home and implement, right? And
Mhm.
it's then when the parents start implementing it and that they start to see gains in the child's ability.
Let's assume we have a kid, we have a family. They come and they talk to you about the nutrition program. What are the first things you look at? What do you analyze? And what do you see as a common thing? I can think of sugar, but I guess you can think of some easy things. And let's do a one, two, three, maybe actionable items and see like, hey, if you do this, probably you should stop that because that works for 80% of the kids that we see, or we see a common mistake that parents do. So, what are those things that you would point out?
Yeah. So, I mean, when looking at nutrition specifically, and as you kind of said, every child is different, right? But if we look at the vast majority of the children that we look at, number one, removing sugar is an essential part of their nutrition program. And by the way, in our digestive tract, there are 500 million neurons. There are actually 500 million brain cells in our gut. And so the gut and the brain are always communicating. So it's one of the reasons why food is so important for brain function. So yeah, we remove sugar. Number two, we remove foods with artificial dyes and sweeteners. And then usually third, we will remove gluten and dairy products for a child. And that's because gluten and dairy are the two most common food intolerances that neurodiverse children have. And when a child has an intolerance to a specific food or an allergy to a specific food, it has an inflammatory response in their body. And so when we remove those foods, very often we see the child become healthier. We might see improvements in focus. We might see better speech development, better comprehension, right? So we often see changes in areas that you wouldn't think you would see improvement in, but obviously nutrition plays a huge part in that child's
So, and
wellness.
that probably includes the cheese sticks, all those favorite ones. And what about the goldfish? Is goldfish okay?
Unfortunately, goldfish is not okay. It has gluten in it. Yeah, I'm not. It might. I don't even know if it has sugar or not. But yeah, so our parents do have to become very focused on reading ingredients of products, and a lot of the time we have to stay away from a lot of packaged products because very often they're kind of processed. They have a lot of additives, preservatives, and so often we have to take those out for our kids. There are specific cases where we might look at certain foods that will spike glucose or blood sugar levels, like fruit, but that's really only in specific cases. With most children, we're just focused on taking out sugary foods with added sugar.
Got it. Switching gears, let's talk. I'm really curious about your oxygenation program. I'm a huge fan in general. Tell me about the significance of it, the impact, and who is this for?
Our oxygenation programs have to be taught to families in our clinic is because the child needs to be approved for it by a physician. So our medical director sees children and approves them for it. It's just about child safety. The oxygenation programs are actually pretty physiologically basic, but what they're focused on is how can we increase oxygen delivery to the brain? Oxygen is the food of the brain. And yet, or like, just to explain how important oxygen is to us, if you and I stop drinking water, maybe we could survive a few days, right? If we stop eating food, we might be able to survive a few weeks. But without oxygen, you won't survive for more than 3 or 4 minutes. It is the most important thing for our brain to function. And so when we increase oxygen delivery to the brain, for neurodiverse kids, it results in better function, better speech, focus, cognitive ability. Now, oxygenation is important for everyone. I mean, we can improve oxygenation to our brain and body through physical exercise. So when children are climbing up on monkey bars and running, all of those things are good for oxygenation. Our specific oxygenation program increases something called vasodilation. Okay. So there's a specific mask which is used with the child and vasodilation is an expansion of the blood vessels. Okay. So when blood vessels expand, it carries more blood and oxygen with it to the brain. And then the brain starts to function better as it gets more and more of its food. So it's with the implementation of this special mask, which has been a part of the Doman method for actually 60 years. And I do want to say, even though it requires physician approval, it is a very, very safe program. It just require when of course when you're dealing with children and their health, you have to be as careful as possible. So, yeah, so the oxygenation program, in addition to also doing different kinds of physical exercise, are really great for getting more oxygen to the brain.
And brain traumas, right? So let's
Yeah.
say if the brain gets a little bit compressed, it might not even be visible, but that's what potentially can cause a chain reaction. And that's why through oxygen therapy, you are able to revert or mitigate certain impacts of those not even visible potential childbirth injuries, right?
Yeah,
We're not
absolutely
talking
right. Yeah. Many children that we see were born prematurely or had a traumatic birth process and they suffered hypoxia, which is a lack of oxygen, and that injures brain cells. So, yeah, we're basically doing the reverse by providing more oxygen to the brain as part of treatment.
Yeah, and from what I remember when I studied hyperbaric oxygen therapies, there were studies done, and they were saying that pretty much any child would benefit from early exposure to high pressure oxygen. So being
Mhm.
put in some sort of a hyperbaric chamber or whatever the methods are. I'm not sure exactly how it works because kids still cannot work on their decompression on the ears, so I'm not exactly certain how it's done, but I know of the benefits. So if someone is interested, they can find the Doman Institute, Google them, call them, and get some consultation. And your books do provide quite a bit of information on that. So that's great. Let me ask you a couple questions. So you have the physical development, physical activities. You dedicate quite a bit of time towards that. I do know that you have a massive course educating parents on how to do it, what to do, what they can do at home. Tell me a little bit about that. What is your approach? What do you teach?
Well, for children with severe physical limitations, children who aren't able to walk yet, the most important thing that if I could only tell a parent one thing, it would be the best place for your child to be for their mobility development is the floor. The floor is essential. It's a playground for kids for them to learn how to crawl on their belly and then creep on their hands and knees, which are the two major milestones a child needs to achieve before they walk. And very often with children with physical limitations, they actually spend most of the day either held in their parents' arms or put into a stroller or a chair where they have no opportunities for movement. So now we're taking a child who already has physical limitations and then limiting their natural ability to develop their mobility. So what we do with kids actually is we give them a lot of what's now called tummy time, where they're down on the floor on their belly and they're having many, many opportunities during the day to move their arms and legs and learn the process of crawling forward. Now, we have, even with children who fail crawl and creep, we have different methods that we use to help those children learn how to crawl. But that the floor is the most important element. If a child's not being given that opportunity, the chance of them walking is very, very unlikely. Now, if we look at other programs, and I think that for people who follow what Brainrich kids are doing, I think they'll find this interesting. One of our most commonly used techniques is something called brachiation, where a child learns, kind of like a monkey, to go from rung to rung on a ladder like monkey bars. And so when a child is actually, and it's important to say here, Yegor, now I'm talking about kids who can walk. These might be children with learning difficulties or autism or when a child is doing this motion of brachiation and they're naturally going from rung to rung, it helps them with various very important brain abilities. Okay. The first thing that it does is every time they grasp a dowel, they are improving their pincer grasp. So they're grabbing it, they're using their ability to oppose their index finger and their thumb. And that's very important for basically every fine motor skill, from buttoning and unbuttoning to tying your shoes to writing, right? We have to use that pincer grasp. So, monkey bars or brachiation, very important for that. But another thing that it does is it helps visual focus because each time the child goes to grasp the next rung, they have to use their two eyes to see where that rung is to grasp it. So it's very good for visual focus and attention. And then last but not least, it's very good for breathing. Okay. Because, I was talking about oxygenation earlier. When a child swings from one rung to the next, their chest is actually expanded, right? There's a natural process of chest expansion when they're brachiating from rung to rung. And that helps, improve lung capacity, deeper breathing, and improves brain oxygenation. So when we and by the way, those are all the brain benefits. I'm not talking about things like all the benefits to muscular development, which also come because we tend to be more brain focused, but there's a lot of great things for muscle tone and emotional development and those things as well. So those are some of the few of the big things we do for our physical program.
And just to understand, how much time do you recommend for kids to actually do the monkey bars, do the physical? What's the, I'm assuming not every parent is a stay home parent. What is the good amount of time that you recommend for physical activities for dedicated, when the parent is literally working with a kid versus and just a free play for kids to just do whatever they want to do?
Well, yeah, in terms of number of times in a day, we would usually encourage a family to try to do it 5 times. So basically, can you get the kid up 5 times in a day to go up and down the monkey bars? Now, listen, for a lot of kids, you don't even have to work to do that because many children will naturally do it on their own. They enjoy it so much, it's play for them, they'll jump up and do it. But generally, we say if you can do 5 times, that's good.
So that's great. I know you also talk a little bit about the outdoor versus indoor play. What is the good amount of time to spend outside?
Oh,
for a
wow.
modern kid?
And then that's a good question, and to be honest, Yegor, I don't know if I have a great answer to it because I think it does depend a bit on family to family, and then also sometimes, especially neurodiverse children, sometimes their priorities might be things that have to be done in the home, right?
Hmm.
Like our oxygenation program or our reading program. Those are things that you can't just like necessarily go outside where there are many distractions to do. So, and also, to be honest, we work with families from all around the world, some that live in freezing cold temperatures and others in warm temperatures. What I will say is, you want your child to have at least 20 to 30 minutes of direct sunlight in the day. That's very good for vitamin D. When it's possible for children to be out barefoot,
Hmm.
if they can be barefoot out in the yard with their feet touching the earth, I think that that's a very positive thing.
Let me ask you a question about the importance of sleep and
Mhm.
recovery before they go to sleep. So you dedicate quite a bit of time and effort to recovery proceedings as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, rest and recovery is essential because, especially when you're doing a lot of stimulation with a child, during sleep, the brain actually reorganizes the information that it received during the day. So, if children are not getting enough sleep, the brain isn't having the time that it needs to fully organize the information and stimulation it's received. Also, when children don't get enough sleep, it can wreak havoc in almost every area of their life, from focus and attention usually becomes poor, behavior becomes poor, their ability to learn becomes worse. So sleep is essential. And then also for children that are doing a lot of physical activity in a day, for a young child who's running around throughout the day and jumping up on monkey bars, I mean, they might be running miles in a day. And so they're athletes. They need their rest. Very often, small children need 10 to 12 hours of sleep a night. And it's very common for children to be sleep deprived because in an era where a lot of parents are working and very, very busy, children's sleep schedules are sometimes becoming more and more similar to their parents' sleep schedules. And a lot of adults don't realize 7 to 8 hours is enough for an adult, but it's not enough for a child. Kids really need 10 to 12 hours of sleep, and they should be going to bed usually hours before their parents. Most children, the natural bedtime is somewhere between 7 and 8:30. And so if you've got a child that's staying up until 9:30, 10, 11 o'clock at night, they're probably sleep deprived.
Got it. Yeah. And in terms of the little tips and tricks, do you have any recommendations on how to put your kid to sleep at 7:30 when they don't want to? Maybe a
Yeah.
nutrition tip, maybe a physical tip. I know I love using hammocks, for instance, as
Uh-huh,
an
uh-huh.
example.
Yeah, a lot of them are about instilling good habits with kids. For example, one of the most important things is just having a set bedtime. Like, it's like we go to bed at this time every night because that teaches the body what time, the circadian rhythm of the body, what time to start shutting down and get ready for sleep. Because if a kid is going to bed at 7 p.m. one night, 9 p.m. another night, it's kind of like jet lag, where the brain becomes confused about what time is bedtime. So have a consistent bedtime. The second thing is have a set bedtime routine. The 30 minutes before bed should be pretty similar each night. Maybe it's bath time and brushing teeth and then putting on your PJs and reading a book. But that routine should be stuck to pretty religiously because again, it just starts to tell the child and their brain, okay, we're starting to go to sleep. An hour before bedtime, no screens, because the blue light from screens tricks our brain into thinking it's daytime. So I would get rid of screens. Those are three things. There are a lot of things that have to do with sleep habits that can be helpful. And for parents interested in the subject, in our books, Answering Autism and the Doman Method from Special Needs to Wellness, we have a whole chapter on sleep and what does a good bedtime routine look like. My wife, Melissa, is actually a pediatric sleep consultant. She teaches parents how to teach their kids to sleep. So the three things I just mentioned are kind of like the basics. And if I had to say one more thing, Yegor, it would be don't allow your child to fall asleep in your arms because if your child is falling asleep in your arms, like a baby or a young child, they will learn that, oh, to fall asleep, I need to be in mom or dad's arms instead of I fall asleep in my bed. And then the problem with that is they start to use their parents as a sleep prop, right? They start to think they associate falling asleep with their parents. And that's why it's better to have things like a teddy bear or something the child associates with sleep rather than them thinking they need you to be with them for them to sleep.
Understood. All right, sounds good. One last question, and then I will open the floor maybe for you to maybe share anything that I might have not asked. We at Brainrich Kids make indoor play gyms for kids, and when we started, we didn't have a focus on neurodiverse kids. We just we built them for any kind of kid. But then through the experience, we've learned that apparently we created a product that benefits quite a few kids with particular needs. So tell me, what do you think about our particular product in terms of any other product out there in the market? What would you recommend? I also know that you have even a tutorial on how to build your own monkey bars and have them at home. So tell me, what do you think? Your honest opinion. You're not obligated to say anything that you don't think that is not there.
Well, I full disclosure, I haven't been in the same room as one of your pieces of equipment. I've only seen pictures of them, but I can see that many of them incorporate monkey bars, which is wonderful. I see some of them, like the one behind you right now, includes hanging, which is very, very good for improving fine motor skills and is usually, you see, hanging from something builds up the strength in the hands and the arms that's necessary for brachiating across the monkey bars. Something else I'll say is that I noticed that a lot of your things have kind of like rope ladders, that I'm not sure if I'm using the same language you use, but the child climbs up the ropes. And one of the nice things about those activities is when a child is climbing, they will naturally grab for something with their right arm and then they will use their left leg to climb up. And then they switch. They use their left arm with their right leg and that's called a cross pattern of movement. When we move in a cross pattern, we run in a cross pattern. And very interestingly, kids who are neurodiverse usually have very poor cross patterns. They don't run in a well coordinated way. If you have them do things like crawling on their belly or creeping on their hands and knees, where again, movement is always in this cross pattern, it's not well coordinated. And that's because the two hemispheres, the two sides of their brain don't communicate well and coordinate well together. So I really like the idea of climbing because it strengthens this cross pattern.
So to wrap it up, your last closing words, tell me what other pieces of wisdom you would like to share and maybe share your contacts, let people know how to find you, where to start, maybe get in the book.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I've got a lot to say on this subject. But yeah, I think the first step, if people want to learn more, we have two books, which I'll quickly hold up. So we've got, and these are books for neurodiverse kids. There are many other Doman books for neurotypical kids if parents are interested in those. But for neurodiverse kids, we have one book called The Doman Method From Special Needs to Wellness. This is a book basically which is good for any child with any kind of special need or developmental delay. And then we have another book called Answering Autism, which is specifically for children with that diagnosis. Now, in addition to the books, we have an online course, which is called the Doman Method course that we teach at Doman International, where parents from around the world can join the online course and we teach them the basic Doman Method programs to begin with to help their children in their speech, in their mobility, in their academic skills, their sensory abilities. We cover a lot. And so I do recommend for parents who want to learn more going to domaninternational.org, our website. Of course, go through the website, but fill out the contact form. There's a form there, and one of our representatives will reach out to you and answer any questions that you have. And they'll ask about your child, make sure that your child would actually benefit from our program, and they'll help you from there. And also, if anyone's interested in possibly coming to Doman International in the future, go to our website and fill out the form. And we're here to help. And I'll say one last thing for parents out there, especially if you have parents who feel like their child has a developmental delay, but even if they haven't been given a diagnosis yet, in my experience, parents' intuition is usually correct. Okay.
Mhm,
So we've seen 40,000 families over the last 70 years with the Doman method. And with
mhm.
every family that comes to our clinic, we ask them the same question. Who was the first person who realized your child had some kind of developmental issue. And
Yeah,
in 80% of the time, it's mom is the first person. Before the pediatrician, it's mom. And so parents need to listen to their intuition more. And yeah, and we're here to help if you want to reach out.
absolutely. Thank you so much, Spencer. I know you're a very busy person. We will share the contacts. We'll put some links to your websites and the books. Thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure having you on our podcast, and we'll stay in touch. Perhaps we'll do some interesting things in the future. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you,
Thanks
Spencer.
for having me, Igor.
Absolutely.